So welcome everyone. My name is Les Allen. I'm the facilitator of the Ex-Religious Support Network. Today's session is titled "The Hidden Toll of Religious Trauma," and our special guest tonight is Caroline Winzenried. Caroline has spoken to the Ex-Religious Support Network on a number of occasions before, so it's great to see her back. And tonight's session is a joint session between the Ex-Religious Support Network and Humanists Australia. So what is tonight's session about? It's this. A clear picture has begun to emerge in the field of mental health of the toll that certain harmful, high control religious practices can take. In 2011, Dr. Marlene Winell coined the term religious trauma syndrome, or RTS, to give a name to the unique trauma that many former and current religious adherents face from their experiences. In this first presentation of a five-part series of online talks, Caroline Winzenried will begin to shine a light on the hidden toll of religious trauma that can last even years after leaving a religion. So a little about Caroline. Caroline Winzenried is a counsellor in Boronia, Victoria, here in Australia, specialising in religious trauma. She works from an existential humanistic framework, helping individuals explore how religion has influenced their lives and supporting them in finding a path that reflects their authentic values. So thank you, Caroline. I shall now hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Les, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for having me here tonight. It's really good to be here and to see some familiar faces and also some new faces. I'm really looking forward to starting this first presentation tonight, just kind of an overview of religious trauma and some of the major themes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to hop in and hopefully we can clarify them for you. Okay. So as Les said, I am a counselor and psychotherapist based in Boronia, and my special area of interest and client base that I really like to work with is people who are exploring their experiences of religion and of leaving religion. This is something that I have a real passion about, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about what that looks like and how to identify that. So I'd like to start by defining exactly what religious trauma is. Marlene Winell is an American psychologist who kind of pioneered this concept and this field, and she defines religious trauma by the word religious trauma syndrome as the condition experienced by people who are struggling with leaving an authoritarian, dogmatic religion and coping with the damage of indoctrination. And something that I find important also to mention is that a big focus of religious trauma of the field is kind of those experiences of people who are in the process of leaving or who have already left. But this is something that can also be explored by people who are still in religion, who want to really grapple with some of the things that come up for them, and particularly around some of these beliefs that can be especially damaging. Next, I'd like to define trauma. I think this word, there are a lot of misunderstandings around it and a lot of myths. I think one of the biggest ones is that when we think of trauma, this often kind of calls to mind images of war, torture, natural disasters, and generally kind of horrific, isolated events. But something that I think is really important to emphasize is that trauma isn't defined by the events that cause it. I'd like to just go over some other myths here as well. So we talked about how it doesn't have to be caused by a single horrific event. It can, in fact, be caused by a series of events or even by relational patterns. And these relational patterns over time can often become woven into a story about ourselves, others, and the world. Another myth is that trauma responses are a sign of weakness. This is untrue for several reasons. It isn't weak to experience a trauma response. In fact, it's a perfectly normal human reaction, and this is something that anybody can experience. The last myth that I'd like to touch on is that trauma must be life-threatening. When the concept of trauma was first being introduced and studied, it was conceptualized as shell shock, and this was considered to be something that only war veterans experienced. And we've come a long way since then, and our understanding has evolved to encompass trauma that isn't just limited to situations that put our lives in danger. So now that we've talked a little bit about what trauma isn't, let's talk about what it is. Trauma is essentially a response to any event, series of events, or set of circumstances which fundamentally alters your worldview and impairs healthy functioning. There are several different theories of trauma and how it emerges, how to conceptualize it. But one popular theory that I think really captures this concept, particularly as it pertains to religious trauma, is Yanov Bullman's shattered assumptions theory. This theory is well grounded in research and suggests that trauma occurs when our assumptions about our lives are called into question in a serious way. Yanov Bullman suggests that there are three specific assumptions that we make about our lives, which we actually need to take for granted to some extent to live healthy lives. These assumptions are that the world is meaningful, that the world is benevolent, and that I am worthy. These assumptions allow people to feel capable, safe, and in control of what happens to them. When any of these assumptions is threatened, it can cause a trauma response that impacts our social, emotional, behavioral, physiological, and cognitive well-being. In the next few slides, I'd like to briefly paint a picture of what this can look like, particularly in a religious trauma context. Then I'd like to take a look at the themes that typically emerge for people as they navigate these responses. So I'd like to start with the social effects of religious trauma. Some of these can include alienation, and this can be both a sense of alienation from the secular community, kind of feeling like a fish out of water, not really sure how to navigate those relationships. It can also be a sense of alienation from your previous or current religious community, feeling like you no longer belong or you're no longer welcome. This can lead to a loss of community and to difficulties with trust and intimacy. Often people describe feeling stuck in the closet, not knowing if it's safe to talk about their doubts or to be open and authentic about what they believe. Religious trauma can also create role and identity confusion. When previous values are called into question, this can be our and our sense of our role in our communities and in the world. And for new identities and roles to emerge, there is often a process of discarding or reworking old ones. There are several emotional effects of religious trauma, which can include guilt, anger, depression, anxiety, shame, and loneliness. We often see behavioral patterns emerge as a theme as well. When someone is deconstructing their faith, there's often a frantic search for the truth. And initially, this tends to start with trying to answer doubts through looking at religious texts and religious sources of information. But when answers can't be found there, the search often extends outside of the religion to other sources of information, including science, philosophy, and secular communities. This search is a really healthy part of the process of coming to your own answers, but it can also lead to a lot of distress, particularly when it continues for long periods of time or leaves someone feeling that they're going around in circles, still lost. Reactionary behavior is a similar pattern in that reacting with anger, distancing, or rebellion to one's previous religion is often a healthy and very necessary part of the journey of believing. But just like with the frantic search for the truth, someone can feel stuck in this part of the journey, and they may struggle to move forward and find their own sense of their values, defining their identity, not necessarily in relation to religion, but based on their own kind of internal truth. Lastly, we see unhealthy compartmentalizing, which can look like splitting one's identity between a devout religious persona and the interior doubting self. And this can lead to a sense of identity fracture. Lastly, there can be, sorry, this is not last, second to last, there are several physiological effects as well, including a hyperactivated nervous system, poor sleep, and sexual difficulties. Lastly, we have the cognitive effects, and these can include low self-esteem, self-doubt, and challenges with decision-making. Next, I'd like to look at some of these effects of trauma through the lens of four major themes that often come up in religious trauma. These themes include social tension, existential anxiety, low self-esteem, and shame. The first theme that I'd like to discuss is social tension. Leaving a religion often comes at a great social cost, and it requires sacrificing not only your immediate community potentially, but also the powerful institutional support of a religious community and institution. This can be incredibly challenging and have really big knock-on effects for people. While many are able to maintain some of these relationships, particularly with family and friends, they often undergo periods of tension as a person transitions away from religion or away from particular religious beliefs. One of the early interpersonal challenges that emerges is authenticity versus social harmony. People who are questioning or leaving a religion often face a difficult choice. The choice of, do I open up about the doubts that I'm having, or do I hide these doubts to maintain these relationships I care about? Many people feel that they have to live in the closet and hide who they truly are. Otherwise, they might lose those relationships. And sometimes certain religions will expressly threaten this and will say, you will lose your community, or these are the consequences that you may even be shunned if you express these doubts. This can be complicated by a sense of responsibility for others. In the Mormon faith, for example, people are taught that you can only achieve the highest form of the afterlife if your whole family are believers. And this can put quite a lot of pressure on people who are doubting or leaving the religion, because they may bear that burden of thinking, if I do this, my family will feel that I'm letting them down, that they won't be able to make it to that level of the afterlife. Sometimes family and friends don't understand why their loved one has left, or may be questioning if they want to leave. They may either distance themselves from that person, or they may actually overstep boundaries to try to get that person back. There's also a real loss of community and resources that occurs at a wider level. Many people's entire communities are connected to their prior faith, their friendship circles, their families, and sometimes even their work. This is particularly true in what we call high demand or high control religions, which have a lot of rules that tend to be quite restrictive. And often we see that this restricts the kind of community that you're allowed to have, often saying that you can only kind of have relationships, whether they're platonic or romantic, with members who are part of that community. For people who work in church settings as well, or whose career as a religiously affiliated school employee, this is a special challenge for them, because often that work requires a commitment to the faith. And so openly leaving a religion can also come at a financial cost. With these interpersonal challenges can come problems with our identity and how we define our role in the world. This is because we define ourselves in large part by the social roles that we take on. With the loss of social connections comes the loss of these established roles and identities. In religion, people are given templates and scripts for how to understand their place in the world. They're told which shared values they should hold, who they are in their community, and how to be a part of that community. These templates are also imbued with a sense of great importance, and members of a faith generally have a strong shared commitment to upholding them. When someone leaves a religion, they lose these templates and social scripts, which may have previously defined them and helped them to build and navigate their social relationships. The process of finding new identities and building new relationships can feel daunting in their absence, as it requires us to build these templates for ourselves from scratch. The next theme I'd like to discuss is existential anxiety. In addition to social and identity templates, religion also provides a philosophical template through which to make sense of the world. Through this template, it takes away the responsibility of navigating life's big questions by giving you a preset of epistemological, metaphysical, and moral answers. But what happens once those answers no longer resonate and you're left to find your own answers? This template makes up what we call a worldview. The worldview is a set of assumptions that we all have about the world that allows us to move through it without stopping all the time to question everything. There are several different parts that make up a worldview, a bit like cogs in a clock. In religion, we're given a fully packaged, interconnected worldview to answer some of the big questions, like what is good and bad? What is the meaning of life? And where does the universe come from? Because of how interconnected these beliefs are, it can actually create a domino effect when someone starts questioning the answers to even one of these questions. And this can lead them to ultimately question their entire worldview. When a worldview is shattered, this creates enormous tension in a person's life. No longer can they move through life feeling confident that they have all of the answers. Suddenly, they're tasked with finding those answers themselves and must create a worldview anew without the tools or knowledge about how to even go about creating it. This process of reconstruction is essentially an unavoidable existential crisis that can touch on many different parts of a person's life. After being told to look to God for the answers, or members of your religious community who hold authority, it can be really hard to trust in your own capacity to find answers for yourself. This brings us to the next theme, low self-esteem. Discarding these religious meaning-making systems can make people question, can I actually answer these questions? Do I have that capability? And can I figure out what is the truth and what is a lie? Previous religious beliefs can also impact a person's sense of their own inner strengths. On the next slide, we'll discuss the impact of some of these beliefs. I've listed here a few beliefs from mostly Christianity to illustrate this, and these are some beliefs that can have a profound and often disempowering influence on a person's sense of self. The first one is, I will always be a sinner, no matter what I do. This message instills a sense of irredeemable badness or sinfulness. The second one is, I must crucify the flesh. Variations of this message teach us not to trust our own bodies and the wisdom within. And oftentimes when people are asked, what do you think about that? Or how would you make this decision? There's a sense that I don't know if I can trust that. Whatever wisdom emerges, I've been taught to be doubtful and mistrustful of that. The next message is God is responsible for all of my achievements. This message teaches people to attribute all of their successes to God and robs them of the opportunity to recognize and celebrate their own strengths. And the next two messages I think are quite interesting because on the face of it, these messages can be quite comforting. Many people often turn to the thought, God has a plan for me in times of distress. The flip side of this, however, is that it can also take away the opportunity to feel agency over your life and the sense of self-efficacy that comes with recognizing that you are the person who can make decisions about it. Similarly, I can give up my pain through prayer is also quite comforting to people, but it can leave them feeling ill-equipped to cope and emotionally regulate on their own. The last theme that I'd like to touch on is that of shame. Some religious teachings have a heavy focus on concepts like sin and punishment in the afterlife. What's more, these teachings sometimes suggest that as humans, being sinful is part of our nature, and that we can only be saved through Jesus or some other religious figure. These teachings around sin in particular can leave people with a deep-seated sense of shame that they are fundamentally evil, bad, or dirty. A prime example of this is purity culture teachings. Purity culture refers to a movement within the American evangelical community starting in the 90s that placed a real moral emphasis on abstinence until marriage. The underpinnings of this movement are by no means limited to this time or this community, though. The messages of purity culture are pervasive and come in several different flavors: shaming premarital sex, non-procreational sex, sex within LGBT relationships, and sometimes this even extends past sex to kissing, dating, or holding hands. People exposed to these messages often experience intense shame and anxiety around sex, sometimes to the point that they feel completely closed off from or disconnected from their sexual selves. Women receive messages that their bodies are inherently dirty or dangerous, capable of luring men into sin. And men also receive harmful messages, including that their minds are inherently dangerous or dirty, and that they can't control their sinful impulses. Furthermore, LGBT people are sometimes told that their entire existence is deviant. There's often a distinct lack of sex education in these communities, which can lead not only to decreased sexual satisfaction, tension in relationships, but also a normalization or victim-blaming mentality around sexual abuse. The concept of sin is so powerful because it's a combination of two concepts: guilt and shame. Guilt is limited to our actions and prompts us to change our behavior to align better with our values. Shame, on the other hand, actually has nothing to do with action or inaction. Instead, it carries the message that you are irredeemably bad as a person and that this can never change. While many faiths offer methods of salvation through prayer, confession, or other rituals, some also teach that we are always sinners, no matter how much we repent. Some religions even teach that we are born sinners and fundamentally bad from the moment we exit the womb. This can leave an imprint of shame or a sense that your core identity is bad. Shame is incredibly stubborn. It has a bad habit of sticking around, even after you've discarded the beliefs that created it in the first place. In a paper published in 2019, Marshall Brooks dubbed this cognitively disconnected emotional response as an embodied memory. I'd like to share a quote with you from his paper that I found really powerful. "It's a traumatic experience," they told me, "not only because of all that was lost in their departure from the church, but also because of everything that still hung on and refused to go away." Healing from religious trauma can be immensely challenging. Each person's experiences are unique to them, but I'd also encourage you to reach out and to speak through others that have been through similar circumstances, because it can be extremely powerful just to have that opportunity to see that you're not alone in struggling with this. And we find that even across different denominations, even across different religions, there are a lot of themes that emerge. Support groups play a really important role in this. One thing that research shows is that it makes a really big difference to be able to talk to people who have been there. It's also a great place to share your story with others, because telling your story can help you make sense of your experiences and create a personal narrative that feels authentic to you. It can also help others who are going through their own journey to let them know that it can be done. You may also find that it could be helpful to devote some time to exploring this with the support of a mental health practitioner, such as a counselor or psychologist. Therapy can be a great place to build coping skills, learn how to listen to your internal voice, and build an identity that feels authentic to who you are. I want to leave you with a hopeful note. Healing from religious trauma is often a very difficult journey, but I hear from people again and again that the journey has changed their lives for the better. It is possible not only to heal, but to heal and to thrive. And I know this because I've seen it firsthand. As a religious trauma counselor, I've had the amazing opportunity to work with clients on their journeys and to see the incredible transformations that they undergo. I'd like to share with you a few of those positive outcomes that can emerge. Through this journey, many people come out on the other side having discovered new strengths about themselves and a new set of values that they can trust, that can guide them. A worldview that is unique and proudly theirs. This authenticity can also lead to deepened existing relationships and a greater sense of acceptance. It can also open the door to new relationships that maybe would have never felt possible before. Finally, people also come away with a greater sense of self-esteem, feeling empowered to cope with their emotions and to make choices for themselves, trusting their own internal voice. And that's all from me for tonight. So thank you so much, and really look forward to the discussion and hearing your thoughts then.